Welcome to the Petty Details of Auto Claims. I'm Jen Petty, and this is Justin Petty. And today we're going to talk about repair disputes. So I'm going to let Justin take it away because he knows all the things.
Repair disputes. I mean, you ever get in a wreck? Unfortunately, you have to deal with your insurance company and the collision repair center on how much is it going to cost to fix it? Will your insurance pay for everything? Um, so if you have that issue, which is pretty common, insurance companies don't like to pay for repair, proper repair. They argue all kinds of things. You wouldn't imagine all the types of reasons they'll give you for not wanting to pay for the blend time on a panel and leaving you, so the trick here is picking a good body shop to begin with. The body shop can do a lot. If the body shop is, I think one of the things to talk about here is DRP, what they call DRP shops versus an independent repair facility. DRP stands for Direct Repair Program and sometimes Direct Repair Partner. I see Clark in the background there.
That's Clark Cat. I'm sorry, Clark Cat is a permanent fixture. He adopted us. He's too fast to catch right now. I just need to let him go so we can talk about this.
So a direct repair program or direct repair partner, these are body shops or collision repair centers that have an ongoing contract, if you will, a relationship and an agreement with an insurance company. The insurance company says, hey, we're going to put you in our preferred network and you'll be in our preferred network. So when somebody doesn't know where to take their car and they ask us, we can say, well, we would suggest so-and-so, and you'll be on that list. And lots of collision repair places fall into a quantity business because of that. There've always been direct repair programs. That's how they got their start. They had an insurance company that said that they would use them, and so they started. And so you have shops that are captured by insurance companies. And unfortunately, my opinion is avoid those like the plague. They already have, if you think about it, you're not the customer when you deal with a direct repair partner because they've already agreed to repair it the way that the insurance company tells them to. And that doesn't jive a lot of the times. There are exceptions to the rule, but most of the time, the insurance company is not willing to pay for what the manufacturer says should be done, or they'll try to tell you that it doesn't take that long to do this, or that you don't have to do a pre-calibration scan or a post, test drive or weld test, or all these things that, that are required operations for a safe repair. Seatbelt tensioner to check. When the car comes in, you want to know, like, were there people in the back seat, because those tensioners and all the seatbelt safety stuff, airbag systems and all that stuff, almost
Sensors,
every manufacturer,
like all this stuff.
right. And and the cost of those things changes as well, and they'll argue what's reasonable and customary cost and labor prices. They like to argue labor because what they'll argue is that, well, we have a shop that would agree to do it at $55 an hour, when your rate's 85 for sheet metal. And it's like, well, we don't work for 55 an hour.
They're in
We can't,
Farmersville and we're in Dallas.
well, I have better techs than you do. I
Yeah.
have higher experienced techs. I have better equipment. I have better tools. I have a better facility. It costs more because we do the repair right, and we have the the expertise to do it right here. And so if you can justify your price, it's not unreasonable, and there are tools that us in the industry know of that we can look up our own. They do surveys on that, and you can look up what's the average labor rate. Why would the average rate not be fair? And most shops would agree to work for the average rate in many cases. Some shops are not willing to do that, and it's like, that's when appraisal comes into play sometimes. So that's what we're talking about, is when you have these issues at a repair facility, and your shop comes in there. One of the ones we had recently, I'll give you some basic numbers. It was a big, green lizardy style of company that was handling the claim. And and
Okay.
their estimator said, look, we've looked at the damages, and here's our estimate. It's going to cost $4,409.69. That's how much it's going to cost. So it's at the repair facility, and the repair facility says, okay, here's they call them blueprints because it's much more in depth than the way that an insurance estimator writes an estimate. I write estimates. You can go into CCC and you fill out, all the parts that are damaged, everything that goes. It's just a, computer program. But the blueprint is a little different than that at the shop. So it gets into, and each shop sort of has their own method of doing that, depending on what systems, what kind of car, who's, all of these different things. Long story short, $400 from the insurance carrier, and then the shop says, yeah, no, 24,000, not 4,000, and it's like,
24,000 and 4,000. How does that even
right.
happen?
And it's just ridiculous. Good shops will argue and argue and argue, but when you're that far apart right out of the gate, you're going to have some
There's no
problems
getting
with
there.
it.
Yeah.
Right. And so in those instances, what happens is either you as the vehicle owner have to take your car to another shop and not let the shop you picked do the work. If you pick a good shop, they'll help you. But if the insurance company does you this way, they're going to tell you the shop's the bad guys. Like, yeah, that shop's way unreasonable. There's 20 shops around here that'll do it for you. And it's like, that's not an argument for what the proper labor rate and proper repair process is. That's just, you don't like it. And it's like, that's just how much it's going to cost. So your alternative is pay out of pocket the difference, all right, come up with $20,000, even though you've got insurance, and
Right.
we'll fix it correctly for you, but they're only willing to pay 4,000 and you owe 24. So you're gonna have to come up with 20 grand. They don't do that. They argue and argue with the carrier. But in that scenario, the carrier was not willing
Did
to
you see that? I'm sorry.
negotiate. It's his name is fitting, I should say, because it looked
His
like he
name
just
is
flew
Clark
from.
Katz. He did look like he flew across the bed.
Had his arms
Goodness.
out in front of him like that. He had his arms out.
He did. That was amazing. I just changed his
But
name today, so
so on that case, just to quickly get through that story,
yeah.
on that case, the carrier maintained it was 4,400, and the shop said, "Well, we can't repair the vehicle for that. Sorry." And they just told the customer, "We can't do it." But they did tell the customer that they had the option of invoking their appraisal clause to force Geico out of the picture. That's basically what the appraisal clause does. When you invoke your appraisal clause because you just disagree with the insurance company, I believe the shop, they're the experts. And if you have an honest shop, they're telling you the truth. There may be some things that can be moved around.
Some
There
wiggle
might be a
room.
little bit, maybe here and there, but for the most part, the shop is going to be estimating it the proper way if they're an honest and a good shop that does that. Certified shops that are independent, those are the shops that you want. But basically, they wouldn't negotiate. They told their customer that they had that option. That customer ended up getting in touch with us. We helped them invoke the appraisal clause, and then Geico named a appraiser, and it was an independent appraiser that doesn't work for them, which is required. Is the whole intent of the clause is to be able to not have to deal with Geico because they're stuck in their internal policies and best practices that they won't tell you why they're doing it, and they can't explain it well either. So she invoked appraisal. They named an independent appraiser, and the appraiser and I wrote our own estimates on it, and I consulted with some other repair guys to just make sure I'm sort of not missing anything and that we all sort of agree that yes, this is, a proper repair amount. And after we go through that process with the other appraiser, we agreed to almost 22,000. So it wasn't quite the full amount, and I think it was a labor rate concession basically that we ended up, that the shop just was like, you know what, fine, for the customer, only for the customer.
Right.
We'll let it go on this one, you know.
It's because they
And the shop
care
might,
about their customers.
yeah. And you know, the shop could potentially, we'll get, that's another video. But yeah, I mean, so if you're having that issue, it's in it with a repair and they're trying to steer you, which is illegal, and they'll be careful about the way they say it, but they'll it's very rampant that they'll try to send you to one of their shops, and they'll use that when there's this kind of dispute. They'll say, well, we don't have to pay more than what's reasonable and usual and customary, if you will. The prevailing market rate is what they try to argue, that they measure by all of their DRP years, you know,
Yeah.
and
And they
so
make it
it's like,
real like convenient to take it to the DRP. They'll be like, "We'll give you this and that, and just drop it off." And they make it real, attractive to
sure,
just
yeah,
leave it and go and let us take
right.
care of it. You know,
Well, and it's funny because that is a common practice, and if you're the consumer, you don't know who to believe. You know, a
right?
lot of times you're like, what? It's like, well, I mean, this is it. They're not gonna, what do you mean? Isn't that fraud? They can't do that. That's not,
Their
and it's like,
customer.
look, they don't know who to believe on it,
Yeah.
and it's just one of those things that you have to know how that works. You have to trust your shop. The shop is who's going to help you on that. If you do you want my point saying that is that I cannot tell you how many times, and I do have shops around where I suggest people take their vehicle if they call me, which I get calls like this. I know I probably get 5 a month where somebody's like, well, my car's fixed, but it's still got all kinds of problems in it. And, I can't get, and they're telling me this is the best they can do, and the paint doesn't match, and it's got a wobble, it all pulls off to the left, and it's like, so you go get a post repair inspection, and these are no joke. One of the very worst ones that I ever saw in my life came from a certified dealer that was certified in the top in the brand that they were repairing, and they just basically spit shined it. It's like I couldn't believe how terrible it was.
Yeah.
They just left all kinds of damage underneath
Super
that you couldn't
dangerous
see.
stuff. Like super dangerous
Very,
damage.
I mean, his headlights weren't even aimed. They just were pointing down at the ground 10 feet in front of him, when he got it back. And there was still damage on the vehicle. And he's like, what? You didn't fix the door.
I'm on
There's
the
a dent
news.
right there.
I'd be on the news if it happened to me. So let's just say that I'd be on
But
the news.
you'd be amazed how persuasive it is to go spend a few $100s at another shop that's trustworthy, that knows what they're doing, to evaluate the quality of that repair. We had one that was on, I sort of follow the circles on LinkedIn and stuff, and there's people on there that post, and there was a post recently that I've seen a bunch of times. The frame rail end on the front of this vehicle just buckled, had mash damage on it, and it was just left that way, and they just fixed instead of
Band-aid.
replacing that. It's a
Band-aid
it,
here.
they did, yeah, they didn't even address it at all. It was just they just left it damaged because
Yeah, it's just like
they didn't care,
I,
and it's like
it's
you
astonishing
can
because
just
you just think no one's going to do
it's
that,
because you have to take the fender off and the bumper cover off, and the headlight assembly and all of that stuff to be able to see that area clearly, and so
hmm
they know
You have
that
to super tear
unless you
down.
put unless you have a lift at your house, once you pick the car up and go home, how many people are actually going to lay down on their back with a flashlight and look and see, and do you
And
even know where to look,
and so I was
and
going to
can you
say, you
even
even know
tell
what to
it's
look
there,
for. That's
And
right.
so it's like all the time repairs get pushed out that are not good repairs at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen some doozies for sure, so you want a quality repair, and you as the vehicle owner, you have to be really involved in it. That's the best advice I can give anybody, is you need to be involved in that, and you need to trust the shop. And if their shop is a good shop, they're going to be able to explain what the insurance company's paying for and what they're not. And I'll tell you this too, here's a good tip. Most insurance policies don't cover OEM parts, original equipment manufacturer parts. They say like, kind, and quality, and you agree in your policy to allow the insurance company to use like, kind, and quality parts. And that might include a part from a junkyard car, or what they call a CAPA certified aftermarket part. We talked about that a little bit in another video. How often do they uncertify those parts? Shops that will use those parts, they're not going to call you when they get the notice that that part was decertified. Come on. So it's
And they
like,
shouldn't have to.
you
That's
don't
like, come on.
you shouldn't be able to decertify a part. You know what I mean? It's
Exactly.
like, how do you get away with that? But repair disputes are becoming more and more common for the use of the RTA process, what they call the right to appraisal process. We call it
Right.
appraisal clause, but I like to add that right to appraisal to
Yeah,
just the
RTA.
terminology sounds. It's your right in your policy when you have a claim against your own insurance company. And recently in both Washington and Texas and some other states prior to that, there's some other states like this. They have, because this is public knowledge, so I'll just say it, because State Farm had adjusted the language in their policy, they changed the appraisal clause completely. I wrote an article about it, the convoluted appraisal clause,
Hmm.
and they changed their entire terminology to eliminate the ability to use that clause if it was about repair. You could only use that clause if it was totaled. And so they changed the language in their policy. And the Department of Insurance was like, hey, that slipped by us,
Hmm.
and you gotta give that side eye on that
How
one, Jen.
long? Okay, here.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna do the little meme. I'll put the little meme up. So ridiculous.
Yeah. The side eye. But yeah, so they got away with it, but they just passed a law this year. It goes into effect in September, I believe. And so now they're gonna have to have a uniform appraisal provision in their policy that does not exclude repair. And them and another company are the only ones that got it pulled off. The other company doesn't even have an appraisal clause in the policy at all,
Oh
so you can't.
yeah. Wait,
Yeah,
what company was that?
yeah, auto owners.
Auto owners.
And
Don't get auto owners.
I
Lord have
mean,
mercy.
I had one when I've got the policy because the guy called me and I said, well, let's just use appraisal clause. Let's make sure and read the language and see what the language is in it and make sure, because that's a whole nother, we already did this video, but there's may request or may demand,
Right.
language.
And
And
that
if it's may
matters.
request, yeah, if it's may request, then the insurance company can say, well, thank you for your request, but nah,
They
you
can. They
know,
can do that.
and it happened in California. I looked at that case, and this was through an attorney. I said, "Well, you can try it, but
Do it nicely.
it says that you may request. It doesn't say that you may demand it, and that one word makes a big difference." And he found out I was right. He tried to invoke it on behalf of his customer, and they politely declined to,
Yeah, they did.
go through the process. And it's
Uh,
like, see, but anyway,
what in the
repair
world?
dispute. If you pick a good shop, if you don't know a good shop, call us. We'll try to find somebody, or there's the Texas Auto Body Association is a good resource for that. Society of Collision Repair Specialists. These places have branch out, and you want an independent shop that's not on a DRP program. It's just I can't advise someone to go to a shop that has a DRP program in place, because it shifts the customer from the owner of the vehicle, and it gives the insurance company too much power over the repair, which, in my opinion, compromises the safety of the vehicle. So the
Yeah,
aftermarket parts and stuff, that thing, to finish that thought, because I'm jumping around here, it is you can get an OEM parts endorsement. It's cheap enough. It's not very much per month, like $2 or $3 a month, to get an endorsement that says if you have a wreck, they have to use Honda parts, or they have to use Toyota parts, or they have to use Ford or Chevy. They have to use the original equipment manufacturer parts in the repair. And a lot of people don't know, that that's allowed, that their insurance company can use junkyard parts or, non Ford parts on it. It's common for bumper covers and hoods, and there's certain parts that are commonly used as aftermarket parts because they can get away with doing that in those policy situations if the part itself, there's some rules that are based on case law and legal, precedents. But if it's a mechanical part like the Honda, for example, they will you can't use an aftermarket or a non-OEM part on this mechanical aspect of the vehicle, or this safety aspect of the vehicle, or this area, or this sensor, or this panel behind the sensor, or this fender that the sensor mounts to for the lane departure, or any of those. There's rules about when it will still remain certified by the manufacturer. So if your insurance company has this ability to use non-OEM parts, first of all, it adds to the diminished value of the vehicle, because that's easy for somebody to see that knows what they're looking for. You can see the Kappa sticker there, and that it's like,
I wouldn't
but you can
know,
tell
but
too, and it may affect the warranty of the vehicle, though that gets into some legal analysis and interpretation of what the warranty covers and whether that part contributed to the damage, all this stuff that you have to realize. But it's just a problem that you don't need to have if you just
right.
use OEM parts or
Yeah.
get an OEM parts endorsement. I think that's it. Is there anything else? Oh, there's one other thing. This comes up a lot when you take it to a shop like that, and that happens, and it's like the shop is like way higher than the insurance company, and you figure out, you know what? I love the shop, and I want them to do the repair because I wouldn't trust it if somebody else did it. I'm going to invoke appraisal clause and you go through that process, and then the insurance company after a month goes, yeah, y'all were right to start out with. We're going to total it.
Yeah.
And so
After like a
then
month and
they
a half.
total the
Oh,
vehicle, and the shop has done all this work to prove it's totaled. First of all, they've torn it down, they've had their techs pull all the OEM procedures and make sure it's all estimated correctly. They probably have a battery tender going on it if when it needs it. And I mean, there's all kinds of stuff, and they're storing the vehicle, there's admin costs, and so they have shop charges now. And a lot of times, there was a big case about this not too long back. The Collins verdict is what I call it, where a big insurance company did that. It was State Farm in this case. On the Collins case, they did that. It wasn't totaled for a long time, and then finally they agreed that, yes, you're right, it is going to cost too much, so we're going to go ahead and total it. We're coming to pick the vehicle up and take it to our salvage lot. And they get there, and the shop says, okay, you can have it, but it's going to be $5,200. Storage from the date of loss, tear down, admin, blueprint, all the different things that they have a right to charge for. Those are reasonable costs in the course of business that they are
yeah. Have to
incurring,
pay people to be
because
there to do that.
and it's most of the time it's because the insurance company will not approve the proper cost of repair on
Hmm.
it. And then they get forced into it because there's no argument you should do it the way the manufacturer says. Otherwise, you can't ensure the safety and quality of that repair.
Yeah.
There's just no negotiation on that if you're a good shop. You just don't negotiate that.
No,
And so
it's
you
not
do the
worth a
proper
life.
repair,
It's not
then they
worth.
total it. So that Collins verdict was exactly that kind of case. What happened was they picked the vehicle up, and then they said, yeah, but that storage charge and stuff was about $1,800 more than what was reasonable. And so even though we agree your car is worth $50,000, we're only going to give you 47.8, or 48.2, because we think $1,800 of it was unreasonable. So here's your decreased value on your car because of excess storage, they claim, and that's a big one. It's a hard problem to solve.
No.
It requires it. It's one of those situations that you may have to file a complaint with the Department of Insurance. You may have to scream and yell a little bit and make some credible threats. You might have to talk to an attorney. I've got an attorney or two right now that have cases just like that, where it's like, look, they don't have the money. What if you want to retain that vehicle, as
Right.
well? How do you pick it up yourself if they won't pay for the storage charges that they cost you to incur,
Right. Yeah, it
by
can be a big
delaying?
issue.
So
Shops are
there's
hurting
a lot of
all over
stuff
the
that
U.S.
that
Shops are hurting.
there's a lot of discussion going on about that right now. I could talk about it for a long time. So
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. We'll
if
do
you're
that some other time.
pick a pick a good shop,
Pick a good shop.
and if you
Look at
have
Yelp
questions about
reviews.
that,
Like it.
uh,
Look at online. Look at their reviews and stuff. And Justin has a good article about how to pick a good shop. So maybe we could go over that sometime.
yeah, or yeah, yeah. or just call us and ask us,
Yeah, yeah, that'd probably be the best thing.
because we're in the industry. I know the good shops. We do this all over the US, and so I probably know somebody that knows who the best shop is, or I probably am working with them, because I will not work with shops that are not honest and that are not doing proper OEM repair, because it's makes my job too hard.
Yeah.
I can't navigate a repair dispute if the shop is playing games. The
Mhm.
shop has to be serious about doing the proper repair. Then at that point, if there's a dispute, it's typically a valid dispute that I can resolve with somebody that's not the carrier, with the independent repair, appraisers out there. Most of them are pretty decent guys, and
Yeah.
most of them are pretty easy to deal with.
Mhm.
There's some that are pretty hard to deal with, but in those cases, it can go to an umpire, and it sometimes is worth it when you have a big dispute like that. If it's between paying 10,000 out of pocket or paying 800 out of pocket, which one do you want?
Right.
And
Sometimes
so
it's worth it.
if
The
it's
risk
gonna
versus
sometimes it's worth
reward,
an umpire, and the umpires, there's some gamesmanship. I'll just put it like that. That it's useful to have umpires help, because a lot of times the other appraiser, I'll just put it like this, is being persuaded somehow to not agree with proper repair processes or labor rates or things like that. And so when that is the case, that appraiser will readily agree to an umpire in most cases to get that claim off of their desk when they know that it's going to go in our favor, because they know what the proper repair processes are and costs should be. And when it goes to an umpire, the umpire is going to award it that way. I umpire those cases. There's a few people that do that are really good at it, and I strive to keep up with those guys to make sure that I'm being fair whenever I do one of those.
Mhm.
I didn't come from that background, which is different about me. I came from the litigation and recovery background, even though I've got plenty now going on 30 years, and all those, I've got plenty of experience with regard to the repair side of it,
Mhm.
but it's just not what I started on. I've
Right.
learned it over the years, because I
Right.
was writing it. I wrote estimates when I first started, but that was just simple, go out and write estimates, and that's not too difficult. And I was doing it at the direction of an insurance company, which tells you just do it like this, start from the outside, go in, and they teach you how to write an estimate. And
Mhm.
it's pretty easy if you can identify the parts on the vehicle, because there's crash estimating guides that are built into these systems. You don't have to think about, how long a typical tech will work on it. There's formulas that are built into the system for that. So
The
it's
problem
not
is
like I
that you're
don't know
never
that.
going to
It's just
be
I
more
didn't
of an
mess it up.
expert than the shop at writing the estimate. So,
Right.
like, it
The
just is what
shop,
it is.
pick a good shop.
Pick a
That's
good
how I'll
shop.
end it. Pick a good shop
Call us.
and call us if you're having a problem. If you're having a
Yes,
problem with a repair, call us.
that's right. If you have an issue with a repair, just reach out to us. You can go to our website and request a free claim consultation, and we'll be happy to talk to you
Uh,
about it. What?
I want to just remind you, now this is the closing, okay?
Oh my
Right, for
God.
you.
I was on a roll, and
So,
then you interrupted,
all
and I
right.
probably could have done it right, but now I'm screwed because you just screwed me up. Okay, reach out to us if you need help, people. Okay, we're here. Even if we're bickering, we're here and we'll help you. So, our website will be in the description, and we hope that you got some value out of this video, this semi long video. Thanks, everyone.